Thank you, Joe. So again, let me thank everyone for the time today. But we did have some specific questions that we can go through here, and I'll throw them out to Michael. Michael, you had indicated when we were discussing apps on the particular devices that it wasn't a recommendation due to the fact that you've got to create multiple ones and have to go through some gatekeepers in order to be able to get them distributed out to customers. So the question that was posed is, what if accessibility to content is limited by connectivity? So someone needs it to be local on their machine. What's the recommendation? Is it a downloadable ebook or something else that you can suggest?
So my number one recommendation would be a downloadable EPUB for that kind of use case. Beyond that, there is support in iOS to create what are called offline applications, offline websites. And in that kind, basically what you're able to do is use some of HTML5's newer features like offline storage, and you can take an entire website and create a downloadable package for a user system. If you set up something like that, it would, for all intents and purposes, it would be a native app for the user. They would, follow the steps that you provide them, and they'd get a button on their home screen just like any other app. They'd click on it. They would have full access to all the content from your site without needing to actually have an internet connection. Now, the reason that I don't give that as the first recommendation is it's currently an iOS-only feature. As far as I know, there are no plans in the Android community to be supporting something like that. So it's definitely a feature that many developers, myself included, think would be great to include on Android. Even if Android supports it, though, Windows Mobile is not going to support it. And even if Windows Mobile supports it, you're still missing BlackBerry and Kindle and Nook. So yeah, it can definitely be something nice for some platforms, but overall, your best bet is going to be
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. There were questions as to whether the slides in a recording would be made available. We are recording this session and plan to post it to the Suite Solutions website. So anyone who has colleagues who weren't able to attend today, or if you want to review it again, as you get closer to thinking about mobile content, it will be made available on our website. Michael, another question that we had, there was someone looking for a little bit more explanation by what you mean by media queries.
Sure. Media queries, I'm not sure how familiar you are with CSS, but in CSS, what you have are blocks. You put in something called a selector. For example, you say, I want to match every single paragraph. So for that, you would just have a selector called P. And then you put in some braces, and within those braces, you put individual attributes. So you can say, I want color to be red, and I want background to be yellow, something along those lines. That's the overall look and feel of CSS. What media queries do is add an extra wrapper around those elements. So what you would do is put in the @ media, and then start putting in your requirements. Something like, screen width is greater than or equal to 480 pixels. And then once again, you'd put in your braces, and inside you would put all the normal CSS that you could put anywhere else. For browsers that either don't support media queries, or for browsers for which the media query does not apply, as in they fail the test, all of the content inside the media query will be ignored completely. It's as if it's not there. That's due to the fallback rules that exist in CSS. CSS says if you don't understand the selector, then ignore what's inside of it. Since we're using the same braces and the same basic look of a selector, all that content gets ignored by default. For browsers that do understand it, they will pretend as if that CSS is at the same top level as everything else. To use our navbar example, what you would normally want to do is have the navbar turned on by default, have the navbar visible by default, and then put in a media query saying, if my screen width is less than 500 pixels or less than 600 pixels, whatever width you decide on, then I want you to disable the navbar and force the content to start at the very left-hand side of the screen. If there are still questions about this afterwards, I'd be happy to put together a small CSS snippet to show exactly what I'm talking about.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Another question someone had when you were discussing sort of that view window, is it possible to substitute a press and hold behavior for the hover behavior?
I wish. That's a good idea. I wish we could do that. The fact is that press and hold is already used by other features. If you take out an Android device, for example, I do this very often. Let's say you want to open up a link in a new tab. What you do is you press the link and you hold it, and then you'll get up a submenu that gives you a few different options. It'll say open a new tab. I think bookmark is one of those options. So that functionality is already being used. The basic problem is that there's very limited. Let's put it a different way. When you're on a desktop, you have the idea of moving the mouse around, and then the idea of clicking. In fact, you have left click and you have right click. So what they're trying to do on these devices is emulate all of that with just this screen that all you can do is touch. So they've had to re-implement all that functionality with a much simpler input method, and therefore something that was lost along the way was hover.
Okay. Here's an easy one for you, Michael. Could you repeat the name again of the open source tool that's used to convert EPUB to Kindle?
Sure. Calibre. C-A-L-I-B-R-E. I believe that the name was meant as a pun on Libre being close to the word for book, and for free because it's a free piece of software.
Another one, what level of support do EPUB and Kindle formats provide for users of assistive technologies like screen readers? Is HTML a better solution for that particular scenario?
For screen readers, I believe HTML will be a better solution. The real question is going to be if the screen reader software itself has yet put in support for EPUBs. My guess is the answer is no. So I definitely think if you're going for accessibility, if you're trying to get the X508 compliance, it's a much more developed field in HTML. I wouldn't be surprised if standards start coming out very soon for EPUBs. I also know that on the iPad at least, they're starting to put in some kind of text-to-speech support for iBooks. So you might actually get this kind of accessibility for free over there. But definitely, if you're looking to actually comply with some kind of regulations, HTML is a very developed realm for that. And all of the HTML5 features that we've been discussing, all those semantic markup elements, play in very nicely for X508 compliance. As an example, one of the things that you want a screen reader to do is not read out loud the entire table of contents every time it loads a page. And by using the new nav element, you get that kind of functionality built in. So definitely HTML is a good route for that.
Okay. Great. Another question, Michael. How has rotation been used to improve display? I assume that you can always rotate things manually, but have you ever seen any kind of auto rotation used?
What do you mean by rotation? Or images on the page?
I'm assuming the question was meant for if you think about a particular page where landscape versus profile may be more appropriate, where it automatically rotates to the other if the content is better suited for a horizontal display versus a vertical display.
So that is not allowed at all on mobile devices. The reason is that mobile devices will pay attention to the orientation that you're holding the device. If anyone's ever, it actually can be frustrating sometimes. You're sitting there reading a page, and you flinch, you move a little bit, and suddenly the page completely flips upside down or something. That's just the way the devices work. So if there's a page that looks better landscape than portrait, it's actually up to the user to turn their device manually. There's nothing built into the system that allows us to force the orientation. That's actually one of the domains that an app would have an advantage over HTML or EPUB. In an app, you're able to actually control what orientation. And if anyone's ever played Angry Birds, if you try to hold Angry Birds in a portrait view, it doesn't work. It forces you to turn it over to landscape. So that's definitely an advantage that apps have. We don't have that in either HTML or in EPUB.
That was a good example, Michael, but we're all professionals on this call and would never think about doing something like play Angry Birds. I think we just have time for one more question. So, and any that we didn't get to, we will work on getting answers to you. And I apologize we didn't get to all of them. But the last question is: there a way to deliver full-color marketing materials such as data sheets to mobile devices, or are we limited to very basic docs, more resembling user manuals or other kinds of technical documentation?
So it depends on two ideas. One is the delivery format, and one is the device you're delivering to. The simplest example, if you're delivering to an old-style Kindle or to an old-style Nook, there's no way you can get color material out there because the devices are black and white. So you just don't have that option. If Kindle Fire came out recently. They have the Kindle Color, they have the Nook Color. All of those do have color support. If you're dealing with the Kindle, and you're dealing with Kindle format, you're also not going to have a huge amount of flexibility, but it really, if you just embedded it all as an image, even the Kindle has full support for color images. When it comes to EPUB on the iPad, when it comes to a web page on Android, any of those kinds of combinations, you can do whatever you want. You have a huge amount of flexibility as far as what you're able to do. In fact, when it comes to mobile sites, you actually in some ways have more flexibility in how things are going to look than you do on desktop, just because you don't have to cater to the Internet Explorer market anymore.
All right, very good. Well, thank you, Michael, for the time you put in today. Thank you to everyone who took the time to attend.